Well, let's meet a startup that has been busy raising, and the disaster response company iluminr has raised $4.2 million in a round led by QBE Ventures. The SaaS enterprise is going to fund growth into the US market and transform how organisations build resilience in the face of an increasing number of natural disasters. To share the company's plans, I'm joined by the Chief Growth Officer and co-founder Marcus Vaughan in Brisbane. Marcus, hope you're keeping your head above water there, because I know up there you've been dealing with a bit of wild weather yet again. Tell us the story of your startup, because I know you've been collaborating with some others in this space. We've covered that story previously. Congrats on the raise. But what you guys are doing in terms of just helping people get their heads around what they've got to deal with is quite a fascinating space.
Yeah, it is. It's a really growing industry at the moment. I think there's certainly no shortage of crises that we've seen. I think the world woke up to that, obviously, when we all experienced COVID. But even since then, working with organizations, we're seeing major disruptions and disasters, everything from, major ransomware attacks, take down organizations, both locally and abroad, right through to obviously natural catastrophe disasters increasing, which is sort of major hurricane tear through the US as well, looking at flooding again in Australia, but also ongoing supply chain issues that we see that come with, I guess, the political instability and also the fallout that's happened from COVID over the past couple of years. So yeah, absolutely. There's certainly no shortage of crisis. And iluminr, we've been really working with organizations through our tech platform, really to help organizations get a better understanding of what that threat landscape looks like, put them through micro simulations to understand what a disaster looks like and feels like, and also prepare them to actually respond to that disaster, really so they have a much more effective response to go into those types of situations.
Is it part gamification as part of the training process? And just tell us a little bit about how the tech that you're using kind of manages to create, I suppose, catastrophes that are unexpected, because we all know you can go through these manuals and it's like very rarely does a disaster happen the way it's planned to happen.
100% correct. And I think that's where a lot of previous organizations in the space maybe didn't focus their attention. We're really focused on the engagement factor. So really building that capability. As I mentioned, so the gamification component, we use what we call micro simulations, 15, 20-minute little exercises that we put teams through, very lifelike simulations in the platform. They get a little bit of acute stress. They understand the pressure that's involved in a particular situation, whether that be a ransomware, whether that be a supply chain issue or a 7-day power outage. And it puts them through the process of really having to learn about what do we have to prioritize and do to respond to this particular crisis. Go through that, and it's never easy, but they are short, sharp sessions. And through that, we just see that level of engagement, understanding and awareness in these threats absolutely go through the roof. And with that, compared to the old half-day exercises that a lot of organizations used to put their teams through, which a lot of people don't have time for anymore, we're just finding that teams are really taking to the gamification component of this. We're just making it very simple for them to participate. And so, we're seeing increased engagement levels, which is good for everyone.
Now, Marcus, you've got QBE Ventures backing you. Of course, the insurer knows a thing or two about things going pear-shaped and the consequences, especially financially, as an insurer. What does the capital mean for your business, and what are the plans?
Yeah, I mean, we had great alignment with QBE. It's fantastic to be able to partner with them. They're really focused on building resilience into their customer base as well, which is just totally aligned with what we're trying to achieve here. We're pushing heavily into the US. We've already started developing our team over in the States. Obviously, there's a real huge appetite for what we're doing over in the US market. So we've already restarted our recruitment process in that and have now boots on the ground over in the US. But we've also got a lot of product that we've been developing out with major customers, both locally and abroad. And so we've doubled the size of our engineering and product team so we can bring that product to our customers much faster in collaboration with them and really solving the problems at hand. So it really is speeding up what we had always anticipated it to do. And now we've got some great backing and great partners there in QBE who are just, as I mentioned before, totally aligned and preparing organizations to really deal with these situations when they're at their worst.
Marcus, as we talked about earlier, of course, you are training people to expect the unpredictable. But when you've gone through these scenarios, there's been no shortage of them unfolding over the last couple of years as you've been building out iluminr. Tell us a little bit about the feedback you've got from people who have gone through the experience and then, of course, been on the front line.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that. We've had organizations go through some of our micro simulations, unfortunately, to only experience something very similar thereafter. I think one of the major things that we've all experienced in the last couple of years in particular, though, is it's not just one crisis at a time anymore. We have to keep in mind, the last couple of years, we've been dealing with COVID as a base layer crisis, and then we've had staff shortages on top of that, supply chain issues on top of that, and if you're really unlucky, a ransomware attack out of the blue. So the compounding crisis effect is something that has really impacted leadership teams and teams right across the organization, people right down to the shop floor, really feeling the burden of that. And I guess our micro simulations are now helping organizations get across more of these threats throughout the years, because they are short, sharp exercises, so they can get a feel for what those various threats feel like. Again, just so that they're more prepared. The feedback is really positive right from the get-go. I think people are taking to the fact that they are short and sharp, so they're not feeling the stress for too long, which is really important part of gamification, so they come back for more. But also the fact that, as I mentioned before, we've had organizations go through micro simulations only to experience the real thing thereafter. And it really helps their muscle memory so they can get back to good practice and process to really focus their priorities on mitigating those losses.
Yeah, it is extraordinary when you think about it like that muscle memory in terms of dealing with crisis at a time where we all know you can be that stressed that you can freeze. So if you have trained, that's why you do it in the first place. I do want to ask you about your customer base, because I think you've got more than 50 customers already. Uni of Sydney is on there, Ramsay Healthcare, General Property Trust, GPT. Tell us about your ambitions in terms of who you would like to have on that roster.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've seen a really interesting demand come through, obviously from regulated industries like the financial institution space, both locally. We've got a lot of financial institutions in Australia due to the heavy regulation here. We're seeing that translate really quickly through to the US market as well. But what we are seeing is other organizations coming from other areas. Professional services is a big swing into this area. We're also seeing a lot of the tech and also even telecommunication providers worldwide look at this quite seriously. Manufacturing, obviously, they've experienced a whole host of various different crises with staff shortages and supply chain. So we are seeing, a really overwhelming demand come from right across the board from organizations, typically in that mid-market through to enterprise, really pay a lot of attention to this.
And in that context, Marcus, when you and your co-founder, Josh, put this idea together in 2019, you couldn't predict what was coming up over the next couple of years. Has it been a blessing in disguise for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, it has been really interesting. I think that the biggest thing is we've just learned a lot, right? I think, how you think you're preparing for a crisis and then to go through something like, COVID, and as I mentioned, everything else on top of that. I think it was a real, real eye-opener for organizations, to your point before, that you can't just rely on a 50 or 100 page plan to do the talking for you. It really does come down to stress testing, what it feels like and what it's like to go through in those situations to build up that capability and that muscle memory, those lines of communications, trust, rapport, all those things that aren't written on the plan. And I think that was the big learning that came from pretty much every organization and us as well, which really fueled our growth into really gamifying that experience to get more people activated, more people into this, build up that muscle memory, build up that capability, so they can just be much more agile and versatile regardless of what the situation is that's been thrown at them.